Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Today, we are here to hear from the artist Nicole Wilson, whose exhibition Utsi just opened this morning. And there she is. Hi, Nicole. And we will also be hearing from Nina Katchadourian, and they will be in dialogue today to talk about the exhibition, this process, which was years in the making. Sometimes I think it was 5,300 years in the making. And we will also have a little bit of insight into this kind of melding of minds because the two of these artists have quite a special relationship, and can't wait for them to share that with all of you. For those of you who are joining and haven't been to the gallery or heard much from the gallery, I'll give you a little brief primer. My name is Ingrid Chen. I'm the founder of Cray Shadows Art Gallery. We're based in Brookline, Massachusetts, right outside of Boston, and we opened in December 2020. Our programming is varied. We have contemporary programming from emerging and mid-career artists. And with an artist like Nicole, we've been actually working together on this project for almost 3 years, I want to say. I met her at Spring Break Art Fair, where she was exhibiting another brilliant project called the National Debt Project, and we've stayed in touch. I just want to preface some of this by also saying that when Nicole told me about this project with a mummy called Utsi, I think she assumed that I wouldn't know who Utsi was, but at that time, my 5-year-old son was obsessed and still is obsessed with mummies. And I had this Nat Geo book for kids about mummies, and Utsi's on the cover. So I knew everything about this mummy, but I could not have fathomed then what an artist could have and would end up doing with this body of work. So I'm really excited for all of you to see this. This is going to be about 1 hour, and I will pass this on to Nina and to Nicole really soon. I just also want to remind folks that may not be aware that on June 3rd, we're having a second talk related to this exhibition, and it will be about why we chose to digitize and edition these tattoos and use the blockchain to share and distribute them. This morning we sold our first edition of one of the tattoos, which was really exciting. And we're excited to show all of you the process and kind of what it means for ownership and for passing ownership of something that is so ancient now into the digital age. But Nicole Wilson is an artist that is, she's a professor on faculty at the University of Arkansas, and had previously been in New York, and that is where we met. I'm really, really thrilled that she's here in Boston and has just installed this gorgeous show. And Nina Katchadourian is an artist who teaches at NYU Gallatin, and she is joining us from Berlin today. So I'm just really grateful, Nina, that you are probably in different time, we've all been in different time zones, but you just got there, and yeah, just so grateful. So thank you, everybody. Save your questions for the end, and Nina will start to bring those through. And we're gonna try to stop on time at 2 o'clock so everyone can get on with the rest of their day. So I'm gonna sign off, and over to you, Nina. Thank you so much.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. Greetings from Berlin. I was in New York the last 2 months and just got back here, so I'm hoping the jet lag isn't going to turn me into a really punchy question asker. I also noticed the clock on my wall had stopped while I was gone, so I will be in a timeless space. Perhaps is appropriate to talk to Cole about that in a room with a clock that has stopped, because there's something about time and duration that this whole project revolves around in many ways. So I think it might be best to actually just let Cole talk a bit about her work before we get into more of a conversation about it. So I'm going to actually pass the baton to you, Cole, and let you orient everyone.
Great. Well, I see so many family and friends in the Zoom attendees section. So thank you everyone for coming. And before I get started, I just want to thank everyone, everyone for their help with this project. This has been a labor of love for many years, and also, yeah, lots of help from lots of people, family, friends, and from afar. Y'all are thanked in the book, so you know, I won't go into listing names because I know we don't have that much time. But I see you. Thank you very much. So Utsi is a project that I started back in 2012. And this iteration here was done in started in 2016. Essentially, Utsi is a Copper Age man. He was found in the Alps in the 1990s, sort of accidentally by hikers who came across his body. Sort of found out later that he was a Copper-aged man, and he now is in South Tyrol at the South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology, where he's researched and studied. Because Utsi is a natural mummy, he wasn't prepared for death. So most mummies, like we know about them, but they, their organs have been taken out, or there's been some sort of process that has happened. And so you can't actually sort of figure out a lot about the lives that they would have lived beforehand. But because Utsi is a natural mummy, they can reconstruct his last meal, cause of death, absolutely everything. But the one sort of mysterious thing about this mummy is that he has a series of 61 tattoos on his body. And while they can conjecture as to why those marks might be on his body, nobody really actually knows why. And so I became really intrigued with this idea and conceived of the idea to tattoo his marks onto my body in my own blood. And then slowly watch the tattoos fade and document them over the last 5 years as they've turned into just faded marks. So I'm gonna quickly, we had some technical issues earlier, so I'm on my computer and not an iPad, sort of walk you through the gallery space behind me. All right, so on this wall, the tattoos slowly start to fade. And as you come around, we sort of end up with, nothing. Oh, sorry. And so, over the last 5 years, I've been documenting these tattoos, slowly watching them fade. Sorry, Nina, you might want to come in and jump in and ask me a question.
Well, I think actually, could you go back to one of the very first photos and let people have a really close look at that? Because I got to see these yesterday, but I think maybe one where the marks are really dark will give people a sense of, right. So they do often take the form of these sort of like straight lines, parallel lines. Cole, maybe you could sort of, there's another good example, right?
Right.
Are there variations on that theme?
So we can get to a cross back here.
Yeah, let's look at a cross.
Oh, wait, this one's over here. Sorry. These ones are more faded. Look in here. Yeah.
Yes, there ankle. You can see, right. And that looks like it's right next to your knee. Is that what it was? Ankle?
That's an ankle, yeah.
Oh, ankle. Okay, yes.
Yeah. And the tattoos are labeled, right? Each of these photographs, they're not actually just photographs. I think about them as sculptural objects. So they can be taken off the wall, and their identifiers identify the tattoos, and then also they're time-stamped to the particular day that the photographs of the tattoos were taken. And then part of the exhibition also is taking the form of this artist book that Bryant Wells designed and is published by Small Editions. So this is a much more expansive look at the documentation of the tattoos as things move along. And the works are actually indexical to the book itself, right? Like everything is same size, even. Yeah.
So Cole, forgive me for starting with like a pun. My brain just hadn't put this together yet, but you actually have really made like a body of work. It occurs to me, right? It really is a body of work in every sense, in more senses than I had realized at first. So I guess I wanted to start by just asking you a bit about body, working with the body, working with a body, working with your body and that body. And I was really intrigued. I'm looking at the short artist statement that's on the Praise Shadows website, where I'm going to read a quote that you said back to you.
Yeah.
You said, as empowering as the initial action may be, I cannot keep his marks, Ötzi's marks. They slowly disappear over time and leave me. And I spent a long time mulling over your word choice of empowering. And I wanted to ask you, why and how was it empowering? And I guess maybe I was surprised by that word, because working with a very dead body from long ago may not necessarily be the kind of thing that makes you feel empowered. It may make you feel, in fact, kind of like very fragile, or I could imagine a number of other words could come into that adjectival spot. So could you talk about that word choice?
Yeah, for sure. I would love to. One of the reasons why it was so important for me to start this project years ago was because I remembered learning a lot about Ötzi when I was a child. So if I remember correctly, I was taught about him in school, and the narrative was always like, this is our oldest ancestor, in the way that, you know, a lot of Western art history is written, right? Like we can trace this specific lineage, and there was just a lot about Ötzi, you know, that's not my history, that's not where I come from. And so, you know, I had the initial idea that I would tattoo myself in actual ink, and that would be the thing. But you know, those marks would be permanent, and ink isn't something that's mine. You know, using my blood, that's something that's only mine, and it's also something that reflects back to, you know, ancestors that I don't even know, right? Like that, it's the thing that defines me. So. You know, and I was also thinking when I started the project a lot about like, you know, 70s feminist artists and using the body as a performative way to empower and to, you know, own one's space. So, I mean, that's how the project started, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, over time, as things moved on, the project has changed. And I think that that's what's become so interesting, is that, you know, right after the process of tattooing, I felt some type of way. I really felt in my own, and I felt like I was owning the space. But then there was something sort of sad that happened as time moved on, as you know, I was documenting essentially things that were missing or gone. But at the same time, you know, these marks weren't mine to take. They were, you know, something that I was borrowing for a while for an artistic project.
You mentioned a little while back that it is known how he died. Could I ask you how he died? I don't even know the answer to this.
Yeah, he was murdered. So the narrative was that he had gone down to a village and had some sort of feast, and then they think he was actually tracked back up the mountain and was killed through with an arrow through his chest. So they were able to like find the puncture wound and everything. And then he, you know, fell asleep or passed out and was buried under sheets of ice and perfectly preserved for thousands and thousands of years.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, it's strange. I haven't known that, and we've talked about this project quite a bit. So it's strange. Maybe I never thought to ask, but I mean, now I want to ask you if the violence of that act had any bearing on how you decided to approach this project. And I have a sort of second question lurking behind this one, but
okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, it didn't. And maybe it should have, but you know, I think I was thinking about more about the mystery behind Ötzi's marks as the ripe thing, right? Like the ripeness, because you know, we don't know what the marks meant for him, and to us they're lines and dashes today, right? And so there's something about that disconnect, or that that sort of absence, that I think allows for them to have a redefinition today, allows for the marks to mean something contemporaneously that they never could have in the past. So I wasn't really thinking about the action of his death.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me too to think that, you know, all these years later, in some ways, who cares how, like, it sort of all ends up with the same at the same destination, right? And some bodies, like shockingly, this body stayed around for a really long time to be found. But you know, most things just they'll be dust. Which maybe brings me to the question I said I had lurking behind that previous one, which is that I have thought a lot about your material choices with this body of work, and we've chatted just like for a second about this, but when you showed me around the show yesterday and we were talking about the stainless steel shelves that you have the photos on, and the stainless steel table that's right behind you with the books on it, and your comment, which it's sort of like, it was really kind of you said it almost with a little bit of wistfulness yesterday, but how Ötzi's body is now kind of moved from one autopsy table to another, one stainless steel table to another. He comes out of the sort of preservation area and gets taken out and looked at there. And there was something so, I don't know, I just thought to myself, what an uncozy state to find yourself in forever and ever after. So I was thinking about the fact of that stainless steel and kind of how cold and hard it is. And then the fact of a body, which is kind of this mushy thing. And for those of us who are still walking around in one, like something with, very different textures. So I wanted to ask you about that, how you kind of put material choices together for this body of work and how you made those decisions. I know it's something you think a lot about, so.
Oh, it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm gonna get up. In the middle of the gallery space, I have this stainless steel table that, it's like a utility table, but it's roughly the size of an autopsy table. And like Nina said, the stainless steel shelves are directly behind me, and that's what the works sit on. It was important for me to reference Ötzi without directly imaging him or depicting him, so that he has a presence, but is not sort of, his body isn't imaged in, he doesn't have a choice in that. So wanted to make sure he's here, but not really, have him here. But the other thing was that in sort of thinking about the idea of an ancestor, sort of a formative father, I think that I'm also making callbacks to, early conceptual art and minimalist art in the way that these things are presented. So sort of holding the space for those art historical lines to run through the work, but without being super, I'll stop there because I want to talk about this other thing before. So I was thinking a lot about multiple ways of viewing works, right? So we have the sort of formal gallery presentation of images on the wall. And then we have, an artist book, which is something that somebody can hold and take with them and put on their shelf for eternity, or until it turns to dust, if we want to pull that call back out. And then I was also thinking about the other stuff that doesn't necessarily always get sort of put into these final projects. So I made these, alongside the books are these custom phase folders that hold the archival material of the projects, and they're tied with a latex tourniquet, just to sort of bring everything back around to the initial process of tattooing. And inside the phase folders is a screen print of a drawing that I had made. So this is actually a screen print that I did in my own blood. And this is one of the early drawings that I did while I was trying to figure everything out. And, also while I was emailing all my doctor friends that are in the Zoom room, asking them what happens when you tattoo yourself with your own blood. And also in the phase folder is what I'm calling the index, right? So these are all of the early images that were taken at Three Kings, where the initial tattoo process took place. And these are the only places where these two things exist. And sort of, I'm thinking about the phase folder as sort of holding the back steps and like a Fluxus box kind of way. And then also in the phase folder, alongside the book, is what I'm calling the terms and conditions for use of the digital files. And that's something that we haven't talked yet about, but I think that that's also a really important part of this project, is that, essentially there are these digital files that are out there, and the digital files are the initial files that I made to make the stencils for the tattoo back at Three Kings in 2016. And by putting them on the blockchain and by working with Fairchain in the way that we are, essentially somebody could collect those digital files and just hold on to them for forever, or they could purchase a tattoo and get one tattoo, so they could have a version of the one on my wrist or whatever it is, and then they could put them back up and somebody else could do the action. And so, so that's just another way that the project is hopefully sort of extending outwards, and using a different kind of material process to engage a different kind of conversation and bring in a different kind of history and making, I think.
Yeah, so I think you've maybe indirectly put another useful word on the table, which has definitely been on my mind, on the autopsy table, which has definitely been on my mind as we've talked about this project over time, which is replication and your interest in that. But not just here, not just in the situation where that you just explained, which, you know, digital replication is one way, but I'm thinking about your longstanding sculptural practice and your expertise in things like mold making and projects that you have done. I know many past projects that have involved casting, but also, you know, you're also teaching some of these skills now as a professor. So I guess I want to see if we could ask you to bridge a little bit from this piece and its logics of replication to sort of ways you've thought about that process, both metaphorically, but really literally replicated or made molds, made things that allow for things to be replicated in the past projects.
Yeah, for sure. There's something really interesting to me about like getting up to the edges of things and really trying to understand what something is through the process of repeating it or by I mean, I think you could make the argument that, like, in a weird way, that these images or the action of tattooing is like a mold, right? It's like almost like I created a cast or something.
Yeah.
To fill, and there's something about understanding the full shape of an object or the fullness of an idea by really getting into every sort of facet. I've been thinking about this a lot as I start to learn more three-dimensional processes and feel, you know, like there's something so tactile and actually like building around the fullness of an object. But then I also am thinking about something like, you know, the National Debt Project, which in a way is, for those of you who don't know, I have this other project where I send my found change daily to the Bureau of the Fiscal Service to fund the United States' deficit. And I've done so for 12 years, and it's a daily project and a daily way of making. And so by like returning to, you know, collecting change, doing the same thing day in and day out, you know, and it's another form of replication. It's another form of creating multiples and putting more sort of material ephemera out into the world.
Yeah, or maybe you could even say working with sort of fragments of a bigger thing. I mean, that seems to me like another conceptual connection. But as you were talking, I was also thinking that what you've kind of done with these photographs behind you is sort of circle around yourself and document. Like, you know, when you were talking about understanding the 3D-ness of a thing, I mean, you may have made works that one might think initially of as 2D things, although as you pointed out, you're meant to take them off the shelf and engage them as objects, but also in the way you're describing your own body through photography, you are kind of analyzing it like, you know, in this rather clinical way from part to part to part and gradually kind of circumscribing something. So I mean, you must be asked this often, but I'm gonna ask you again anyway, how your sort of experience of making this project might have, I don't know, from because it's been so many years, what you might have felt about this body far away in time and place that you were working with, and how that could have potentially changed over time to this point in time, or has it? Maybe not. But I'm curious about that.
Yeah, well, I think time is something that I think about a lot. And I think engaging in these really long form projects, it's actually funny. The other day I was searching for something in my email and I ended up, I found my first year review from grad school. And in it, Judy Ledgerwood had written, "We worry your projects are becoming epic in duration," and like all those years ago. And I was like, oh, that's funny. You really saw me for who I was at that time.
It's interesting. It was a worry. What do you think the worry was?
Well, the worry, they went further and they were like, "We're worried you're not going to be able to get anything done." And but you know, I often get sometimes frustrated when I'm teaching, because I feel like, you know, there's this expectation that, you know, artwork turns over in a week.
Right.
And even if one makes something in a week, right, like that particular way of making or something like that could spawn something that happens maybe 5 years later. I don't know. But I found that by slowing down and like giving myself time, this project in particular has grown outside of me in a way. And thinking about, back when I first did the project and when I first got a lot of that press with Inked magazine, the criticisms of the project were that it was all about me and all about me and all about me. And at the time, that really hurt because I felt like I was connecting backwards in history. I was really trying to do a thing. But as time's moved on and as the tattoos have slowly faded, there's something about that fading process that's also sort of allowed me to take a step outside of it and sort of see a life beyond that initial action. And also, I think that the digital files and essentially sharing them, right, and allowing other people to partake in the same action is opening up a line forward in history, so that the project isn't just looking backwards at myself and backwards in time, but has this sort of potentiality for future engagement that I don't really have a lot of control over. I mean, I made the terms for use, but there's the sort of trust that I'm turning over to buyers or those people that end up collecting it in order to participate in my project with me and sort of partake in this future history together.
I'm pulling up the terms and conditions document because I wanted to read a part of this that I really liked. So in the second paragraph, it says, a digital file can be purchased for two purposes, collection and one-time individual use. The artist acknowledges that in some cases, these two purposes may overlap. She's fine with that. And there's something so nice about the breaking out of contract language for this kind of like, I don't know, this kind of warm, short, reassuring sentence. So I wanted to actually ask you about the instructions and the fact that I know these kinds of documents take a certain kind of precise thinking to craft. And that you have to kind of, exactly as you just said, with the future in mind, sort of you're putting something into motion that once it's out there, you have to kind of step back from it and let it unfurl itself in whatever way that it does. So what parts of this contract were the trickiest parts for you to write, is what I was wondering about.
I felt like when it finally came down to do it, I sat down and just did it. And then Ing and I talked about it and I made a couple of changes here and there. And she had a lot of really good points that are more from like, the selling kind of aspect of it that really came into play and helped shape the form of it. But in a weird way, I felt like, especially like the individual use component, I grafted my own experience onto that part. And so for those of you that have not yet read the document, which is probably many of you, I'm going to hold it up so that there's something to reference, even though you won't be able to read it. But the first item, it says the first number says to contact a tattoo shop and find a willing and collaborative tattoo artist to work with. Right, and so that's what I did. I contacted a lot of tattoo shops, and Three Kings was the only one tattoo shop that was into my project. And Matt Moreno, who's this amazing, amazing artist, was willing to collaborate with me. And I really did think about what we were doing together as some sort of collaboration. And decide on a pigment, right? That's something that we had done. And then starting to set up what I think, so number 3 is talking about creating the stencil, right? There should only be one stencil that's made. And there's all these sort of like, you can't cut up the stencil, right? Because if you cut up the stencil, then it's not actually Utzi's mark.
Right.
And as we get towards the end, it's like, number 7, right? At this point, the tattoo is yours. The artist suggests that you document the final tattoo as you see fit, when you see fit, by your own metrics, right? So there's this sort of like handoff that starts to happen as somebody would go into the future and live with the tattoo in their own way. I'm gonna go over here because my computer's dying.
Oh yes, plug that in. Because if I'm alone on the Zoom, I may not get the facts right. We're happy to have, as we kind of transition towards the Q&A, I see a question in the Q&A. Happy to have you guys, join us. Carol Rosenberg asks, how did you choose which of the 61 tattoos to use?
Carol, do you mean which of the 61 to use behind me, or because all 61 are in the show? And maybe that's when this is a good opportunity. If you want to drop a follow-up in, I can answer it, but I'll maybe talk about the numbering system that I used. And that maybe will answer the question too, but the tattoos are labeled T1 to T15. So there's 61 tattoos that are arranged in 15 groupings. So for instance, here, right, this is technically 4 tattoos, right?
Mm.
But it is T15. Yep, I'm good. I remembered. But it's T15, and so that's sort of the way that they're numbered and how all 61 of them ended up in the show. But then in terms of which images of the tattoos ended up sort of in the exhibition, that was a lot of work. We had 5 years of documentation, and so it was really about just trying to get a breadth across all of the years and a breadth across all of the tattoos. And as you could well imagine, like in the first couple of weeks, it felt really easy to document them every day and sort of get the right thing. And then as time moved on, it was harder and harder to sort of do well and integrate into a daily life. So there were a lot of images that we were able to throw out really quickly as we were building the book and building the work for the show. But it did take a lot of time. Yeah. I mean, that's sort of the thing with working in these long durational archival projects, is that you get a lot to weed through.
Before I meant to ask this earlier, if you don't mind going back to the beautiful red book object for a moment. Yeah, how did you make the screen prints? That's, you said you referred to them as drawings made with your own blood, but I just wondered about these two shapes, and I don't know, I wondered if there's sort of, I imagine them almost like they could be an imprint off of you somehow, or what are those shapes?
Yeah, so when I was trying to figure out how this was all going to come together, I had taken my blood and I had put it on my hands, and I was trying to understand what it was as a material. Blood is also a really taboo object, or really taboo material to work with. And so it's something that I feel like when I was first conceiving the idea, I also just didn't understand it. I know it's something that I've seen myself bleed, like I understand, I understand that, but it wasn't something that I looked at beyond, I'm so grossed out at my own bodily fluids. And so there were a couple of days where I was just trying to understand how it would react and how I would be engaging with it. If I were to be tattooing with it, what that would mean. And so I had put blood on my hands, and I had like tissue paper near me, like tracing paper, and I had just put blood on my eyes, and I made like a couple of really quick Rorschach imprints. And again, another form of mold making, if one wanted to go there.
Right, it's true. Printmaking, mold making, kind of both.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so this was sort of the one drawing of sorts that actually had any legs as a image. And so this was sort of the thing that I'd been holding up for many years and hoping to find a place for. And then Sean Morrissey, who's the printmaking professor at the University of Arkansas, helped me make the screens this last April, and I quickly pulled these guys. But it took a lot of work. Blood is very thin, and so it was really difficult to to get these to turn out so perfectly. Yeah.
There's another question in the Q&A. I don't know, Cole, if you can read these yourself, or should I read it out loud? I'm happy to do that.
You can do it.
Okay, Susan Hapgood asks, what do you think the tattoo's original symbolism may have been for Ötzi? Can you talk about what the scientists have suggested they were for, or whether there are other examples of similar tattoos?
I can. So they believe that the most logical explanation, based on the wear behind, like a lot of them are at joint points, and particularly like behind the knee, and a lot of them are on the lower legs. And so they think that based on where they're located and the wear that they can observe on the body, they believe that they might have been acupuncture or acupressure points. However, that totally messes up the narrative of the history of like acupuncture and acupressure. Like it would be the earliest example. It really messes up the history. So that's what they're believed to be. But again, nobody can go back and ask him why.
Right.
So, you know, even if one can conjecture, nobody will really know. It's different than finding lamb or something in someone's belly, right? Like, you know that that's lamb because it's
Right.
lamb.
Did you find yourself, like, because you're so intimately familiar with not only the marks, but where the marks go, did you ever find yourself struck by a kind of aesthetic relationship between the marks and the part of the body they went on? Like something that, I don't know, I'm thinking about like possibly their decorative function, or in some sense, adornment function, maybe. Like there could be clues. This assumes that people then felt certain ways about their body that were similar to us. So this is probably a totally fraught question, but.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've just always been able to look at them as something that we didn't know. You know, there's something always about that
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess I just didn't really try to conjecture or.
Yeah.
You know.
I think it's interesting that in so many places you're completely comfortable with not really needing to know the answer. The murder, this, other things too. Well, it's, you know, somehow I think projects that take on this kind of, you know, solving questions around the past, like they are often so much under this pressure to get to answers. And I'm struck by how you're sort of comfortable and interested in suspending that and sort of, you know, dealing with some things that maybe are known, dealing with some things that maybe aren't known, but then trying to kind of carve out some third connection point between you and the thing. Is that a fair way of describing it?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think that that's the thing about the histories that we draw for ourselves, is that they're always incomplete.
Right.
And that's not to say that I don't really enjoy reading history or, you know, art history. Like, you know, I love my old artifacts. I love going through a walk through the museum. But I think that like it's when that narrative starts to be drawn where things are super crystal clear that you just know that there's so much more that has yet to be sort of investigated. And those things don't mean the same things for us that they did to the people who made them.
Right.
And I think that that's really important to always remember, is that is that we're constantly redefining the meaning of things today and finding our own ways to negotiate them.
So I'll go back to an earlier question. Connie Kramer asks,
hey,
or
Connie.
comments, when I heard my own blood, when you said that, Cole, I felt a small shock at the implications or references of that, such as some satanic cult practice. Can you talk about the use of blood? You've said a little bit about that, but maybe I'll tack onto that. Did that change as you worked with this over years and years and years? Did you grow less aversive to your own blood?
Oh no, I gotta be honest. I hate getting my blood taken. I hate it. I'm such a baby. I had to get a finger prick test the other day to like, you know, test for the COVID antibodies, and I almost passed out on the floor of the CVS.
Oh, wow.
So no, nothing's changed. No, I wish it had.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Rachel Cheney asks, when you were undergoing the actual process of being tattooed, what were you thinking or feeling? Did going through it bring up anything to you that stuck or carried over during the rest of the artistic process / creation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think we can go back to the way that you introduced the talk, Nina, where you were talking about. Also, thank you so much for these questions, everybody. I really appreciate it. We can go back to the term empowered. I think also at that point in time, I'd been really searching for anybody who would take this project seriously. I reached out to a lot of tattoo shops who tried to tell me that I didn't know what I was talking about, that there was no way that the pigment would sit underneath my skin. And I happened to be in the city with a friend who was in medical school, and they put me in touch with a dermatologist friend of theirs who talked me through the actual process that would happen underneath my skin, which I'll go into just for a second because I think it's interesting and might help.
Yeah.
But essentially, when you get a tattoo, ink is embedded underneath your skin, and your body will forever slowly break down that material, or at least try to. It can't really, but if you see like older people with tattoos that have sort of bled out, that's the process. Like that's your body attacking the ink and trying to get rid of it. And your blood has a red pigment color called heme. And so it does have a pigment. And so when I am putting the blood underneath my skin, it's sitting the same way as a tattoo, but because blood is ours, right? It's part of it, your body can slowly break it down over time. And the process is really no different than if you pick a scab, or if you, pick at a zit and you sort of get your blood underneath your skin. It's called hyperpigmentation. And so that's the same process that's happening through the process of tattooing. But I'll circle back around now to Rachel's question. So when I finally, had the date set with Three Kings, and we went through the process, and it went smoothly, and we made sure the placement was perfect. I remember leaving the tattoo shop. My good friend Faith was with me, and TJ, my partner, was with me, and we sort of left and went out for tacos. And it was just this wash where I was like, I finally did it. It's finally,
wow.
Finally get to do it.
Yeah.
Finally get to live with these and do this project,
Yeah. Is a bruise the same thing as what you just described?
No, because, it might be similar, but there's something about the cut on the skin and then the blood gets put underneath.
Of course,
yeah.
Right,
yeah.
Of course, that's the difference.
Yeah.
It's, I think this is one of the, I've had versions of this in my own life too, where, research leads you, or, the need for somebody with a skill set that is very specific leads you into these other worlds, into these other areas of expertise. And it's funny, I don't know how you found this, but sometimes the fact of I'm an artist is the thing that opens the door, and other times it's the thing that makes people slam it, in your face. Like, you shouldn't be doing this, you're out of bounds, you're in the wrong place, get back in your disciplinary field, kind of. And on the other hand, I think sometimes it's so exciting for people to encounter someone who's approaching the thing that person does from some weird, oblique, different angle. And it sounds like you found your person. So, I mean, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
What kinds of conversations did you have with one another about this project? I'm also interested in that.
With Matt, between Matt and myself?
Yeah, you and Matt, yeah.
I mean, it was very professional, and I felt that was the cool thing, is I really, it was a collaboration between us in the tattoo shop. And I would also be remiss if I didn't mention that, I was really thinking about, tattoo art and this sort of fine art that, and those two worlds actually being melded together.
Yeah.
So it was incredibly professional and very to the point. All right, we're gonna get this done. Much like being on an install, where you just have to get things up on the wall.
Yeah.
But I should also mention that when I first started the project, and when I reached out to the museum in South Tyrol, I did the thing where I was like, I'm a crazy artist. Can I have your research?
Right.
And I mean, that's essentially, how the tattoo files were built, is from those initial sort of inquiries and just asking for things.
And I'd want to share what you told me yesterday about one interesting interaction with the museum, and which I think seems to have really informed some of your conceptual decisions too, was that they what I wrote in my notes here is the attitude of sort of, this is a body, this is somebody's body. And so pictures of that body should be used with great sort of care and respect, I guess. And I think perhaps this is the reason you have also decided to not show his body, Etsy's body, right? Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's important that, he has his own, its own day.
Right.
Yeah. This project is doing a lot of other things, and it doesn't need to.
This is a really annoying question. I should have warned you. I might ask this one because it's hard sometimes to answer this one on the spot. But I wonder what other work, and I really don't mean necessarily artwork, but what other things, what other sorts of things in the world did you have in mind while you were working on this, if any? other makers, other writers, anybody, other things that were sort of close to your heart or mind?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that as time moves on, the like sort of people that I've been like sort of leaning up against as conceptual backstops for a lot of the actions that I'm trying to take has shifted. And so I think at the beginning I was thinking like a lot about Hannah Wilke and like, you know, really going through that phase of my artistic growth as a female artist.
Yeah, of course.
And then, you know, in these sort of later days, especially thinking about how to get these works up on the wall and get the digital files produced, you know, I have been thinking a lot about Saul LeWitt as I was writing the terms and conditions. And, you know, that's been a big thing that we've been talking about when we've been working with Fairchain too, is using that as a model of sorts to fall back to. But then I've also been thinking a lot about that Barbara Kruger piece with the Supreme. There's this like particular quote that she has. Oh, sorry, I should also sort of explain that piece. Everyone I think knows Barbara Kruger's work, but the Supreme logo, that everyone knows what the Supreme
maybe
logo
just
looks
describe
like.
It in case not.
It's a skateboarding label, but they essentially appropriated her red and white black text. And another company, I think it might have been like 10 years ago, another company tried to use Supreme's logo, like essentially that red and white text, and Supreme started to sue this other company. And when asked about it, Barbara Kruger said something like, "What a bunch of uncool jokers." And you know, I know that this is really different because it's not it's not red and white text. But you know, I think that there is something about these marks that, you know, as I'm offering them to other people and offering other people to participate in the project and become part of it, you know, these are the questions that are starting to get asked about appropriation and about whose marks they are and who they belong to and what they mean. And so I think, yeah, I've just been thinking a lot about her work and how iconic that red and white text is as it gets digested and sort of moves through popular culture, and becomes something else that, you know, she maybe didn't intend for it to do. But the project that she did with Performa, I think that was in like 2014 or 2016, she essentially built a skate park, and you know, and it's like there was something just so perfect about that, that yeah.
This makes me think about my friend Daniel Boshkoff, artist Daniel Boshkoff, who, to make a very long story short, years ago for the Istanbul Biennale invented sort of a new cookie shape for a very typical kind of Turkish pastry cookie called a simit. And he said in a talk I once heard him give that that now these bakers in Turkey in Istanbul started making this shape. And he said, the perfect artwork to me would really be one where years from now, the shape of this cookie has changed and no one knew how it happened. Like the artwork would just be sort of absorbed into the universe and not known as an artwork at all. And authorship sort of in a way like completely drifts away. Yeah. What do you think about that? Would that make you happy if one day?
I mean, I think that's also, there'd be something a little bit sad about the story being changing, but I mean, that's the whole part of the project, is like the tattoos fade, right? Like time moves on, like, you know, Otzi can't speak about his marks, you know, as time has happened. So yeah, there's something about that I think is really interesting. And I think that it also speaks to the whole sort of impetus for the project, is what happens when sort of history washes all over all of us.
There's even
not to get too
but, you know, even a kind of game of telephone, like one mark and again and again and again. I don't know. I think about like all these duplication processes where the original slowly is like just through the fact of duplication kind of changing a bit every time. Yeah. So
for sure.
What do you think people should be asking you about this project that no one ever asks you about this project?
Oh, wow. Nina, that's one you should have warned me about.
No, much more fun to spring that one on you. No, I just find myself sometimes wishing people would ask me that in an artist talk kind of situation. And so, you know, like I imagine I think for anyone who's ever made anything, there's always this like, how come no one ever thinks about this thing that I thought so much about? Like, what is that for you with this project?
Yeah, well, I think there's two things. I think now at this point, my body gets sort of referenced, but and I think we've done a good job of talking about it now, but it's sort of like I get sort of erased from it, and I think I've been making a lot of moves to work in that direction, but but there's that's a big element of it, and then the other thing, and this is maybe something I can use the last little bit of time we have to actually talk about, is what I'm doing with the physical works and how I'm thinking about all these things starting to sort of be pulled together, and I'm thinking about all of the ways that we hold history and sort of catalog artifacts over time, right? So the phase folder is one way, right? It's like the archive, the Fluxus box that holds everything. The book is sort of like, the book that ends up on the museum shelf that gets taken away, and then maybe a young art student finds it in the library 20 years later or something like that. The works are like the more gallery ready museum works, and then the digital files are essentially speaking to the future way of making work, right, which is that everything exists online. But the other element of that the digital files allow for is maybe the thing that's a little bit more complicated, which is that the work has a story and a narrative and a history in its own life that extends far beyond me. And I mean, that's always the thing that I think I'm thinking about is, a lot of my projects are really conceptual and maybe hard to digest, but my hope is that people later are sort of chewing on them or thinking about them, and maybe it gets recontextualized and a little bit gurgled later, but they has this sort of, and I know you think about this too, Nina, but this like sort of separate life that exists far beyond me. And there's, by allowing people to have works that can exist on their body and have a whole real life outside me, I think I'm actually making that artistic like dream notion that I have into a physical thing that people can carry and live with.
That's so well put. I mean, there's also just this odd thing, and I've had a few experiences only recently of experiencing this, but that sometimes the piece you made 10 years later ends up really meaning something different, like because the context around it has changed. And I mean, I'm just thinking about, we didn't know what Ötzi got these marks for, but there may be some way in the future point in time when people don't really know why you did it, although they may do it. Like, I don't know, there's this curious way, or maybe 10 years from now, they do know why you did it, but something has happened in culture to make that gesture mean something suddenly shifted or different again, or your own thinking about it changes. I really appreciate that you've, I do this too. I really believe in this, like that you have the right to go back into the piece and kind of also add to it, change it, adapt it, reframe it, whatever it might mean to do that ongoingly. I mean, why should things stay frozen? Unless you fall into the tundra and yourself are frozen, I suppose. But you know what I mean?
Buried under sheets of ice.
Yeah, buried under sheets of ice.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, 5 years, right? Like the project has shifted a lot in that amount of time. And I also really love that about your work, is that everything is still really open and fresh, right? And that they continue to have, a new generational family gets added to a lineage.
I think some may not find that perfectly kosher, but I don't care. I think it's really just, I mean, also selfishly, I think like as the maker, one continues to learn something from the thing if it sort of is allowed to be a responsive, malleable thing. So I'm all for it. We are slowly running out of time. It's 5 minutes, I guess, to the hour. So I just want to, oh yes, okay. So Ingrid asks, can Cole talk about the show Traveling? That would be great to tell people about, yes.
So after the show comes down next month at the end of June, it's going to be traveling to the Three Kings Tattoo in Brooklyn, New York, where the initial tattooing took place. And then we will be traveling to Los Angeles in January, and then to London. Well, sorry, the Three Kings location in Los Angeles. Should note that. And then the Three Kings location in in London the following year. So
Right.
I'm really excited about installing this work in those spaces. There seems to be something really ripe about putting the work back into the place where it initially happened, that I think will
great.
be a lot of fun.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So those opening events will be kind of fun too. We're going to do some live tattooing and stuff
Oh, that's
for
great.
the openings.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
With some luck, maybe I can overlap with you there.
Yeah.
We're long overdue for an in-person London catch-up. Well, I will say then that it's been a pleasure. Thank you, Cole. Thanks for this amazing project. It's been really exciting for me to see you work on this over years and to see how it changes and to have it in such a beautiful form now. And yes, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for
Let you
doing
have
this,
fun.
Nina. And thank you to everyone for coming. It's been such a pleasure to be in this Zoom room with you. I know we're all so sick of Zoom, but yeah, thank you for coming. And thank you to Ing and to Praise Shadows. It's been so great. All right.
Bye.
Bye.